All right, welcome to week 2 of the NFL season, and we're going to be kicking things off with the pick video. So today we'll be making all the picks for all the games for this weekend, starting with the Thursday night football game tonight. So let's begin. Just to recap, last week went 10-6. Felt pretty confident about all the picks heading into the first week, and especially with the full slate of Sunday games. There were some big ones that I missed, like the Colts losing to the Jags, but at the same time, I feel pretty good. About 10-6. Now, if you're looking for pick advice, I'd recommend giving me another week to see how I do, because this week feels like it's going to be a lot more difficult. You have a lot of teams, a lot of games that look like it's just straight up chalk, but I don't think that that's doable. We're going to have to pick some upsets. Going to be some unpopular picks here today, because you can't just assume that what happened in week 1 is going to happen in week 2, and so on and so forth. You know, there's that hot hand fallacy that I keep mentioning, that just because something happened doesn't mean it's going to continue to happen into the future. So let's go ahead and kick things off. Having said all that, with the Thursday night football game, where it's going to be featuring two former first-round picks at the quarterback position with Joe Burrow and Baker Mayfield as the Bengals take on the Browns. And for this one, you know, looking at last week, the Browns pretty much showcased the team that they've always been. It was almost like Freddie Kitchens never left, and he's just masquerading as Kevin Stefanski. The game plan that we all thought, or at least I thought, Kevin Stefanski would implement did not come true, and they got absolutely throttled by a really, really good Baltimore Ravens team. So a lot of that has to do with the Ravens being a very good team. A lot of it also has to do with Baker Mayfield having a poor game. And Joe Burrow, on the other side, didn't have the flashiest game either, but he was pretty mistake-free and had the rushing touchdown against the Chargers. But having said that, I don't think that Joe Burrow is ready, because that game last week was not flashy. He's going to have to pull out a lot more stops to beat the Browns this week. I like the Browns as the 6-point favorite in this game, so I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns for this game. And I probably shouldn't. I probably should pick against them until they win, but as I said before, just because the team is 0-1 doesn't mean they cannot win this week. I think the Browns are in position to do it. If not, we might have some panicking in Cleveland. Moving on to the Giants and the Bears. The Bears are favored by 5.5 points. That's an interesting line to me, because I think the Giants should be the favorite in this game, and I think we have some recency bias for the Chicago Bears. Yes, they did pull off fourth quarter comeback against the Lions, but it took them until the fourth quarter for Mitch Trubisky to figure things out. He didn't look great in the first half. On the other side, yes, they just did get dominated by the Steelers, but that Steelers defense is freaking elite. And despite the fact that Daniel Jones faced pressure more than half of his dropbacks, he still looked pretty good. Yes, 2 bonehead mistakes, but overall for the night, he looked pretty good. His connection with Darius Slayton is really good, and I think Saquon Barkley is going to bounce back tonight. So I'm going to go with the Giants to pick up their first win of the season against the Bears, and both of these teams will end the day at 1-1. Moving on to the Falcons and the Cowboys. Cowboys are 7-point favorites. The over-under for this game is 50.5 points, so we're expecting a lot of scoring from this, and I think that should be accurate. The Cowboys had a pretty toe-to-toe game with the Rams last week on Sunday Night Football. Probably should have won that game, save for the 2 questionable calls, that being the 4th and 3 with 11 minutes to go, and they weren't able to convert because the Rams made a good play, and then the OPI call at the end of the game, which is 50-50 depending on which way you lean. So I don't think it's panic time for the Cowboys. I still think this is a very good football team. Mike McCarthy needs to not be as conservative this week as he was last week, because the Falcons are a high-powered offense. It just took them too long to get into that gear, and by the time that they did, it was the game was out of reach. So Falcons are unfortunately going to fall to 0-2. I'm going to go with the Cowboys this week, and that's just going to raise the fire alarms for Dan Quinn's hot seat as it gets hotter with another 0-2 start. Moving on to the Lions and the Packers. Packers are 5.5-point favorite. I really don't think I need to discuss much about this game. The Lions got comebacked on by Mitch Trubisky last week. The Packers absolutely eviscerated the Minnesota Vikings. I think a similar thing is in the cards here. So I'm going to go with the Green Bay Packers to win this game. And Matt Patricia is once again going to look like a fool, despite his acumen on the defensive side of the ball, or at least acumen that he claims to have. The Lions are still a way away. They're going to get Kenny Golladay back this week, I believe. DeAndre Swift should be able to recoup from that drop touchdown pass last week that could have won them the game. But I think on the Green Bay side, the Packers are just too loaded on offense with Devontae Adams, and then you've got players like Adam Lazard. I don't think Marcus Valdez-Scantling is going to do what he did last week, but Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, And then everything rolls through Aaron Rodgers. And given the fact that this Detroit team doesn't have Darius Slay anymore, I don't think that really he's going to be too intimidated by it. So I'm going to go with the Packers over the Lions. Moving on to the Titans and Jaguars. The Titans are 10.5-point favorites, which I think is a little ridiculous. Because I don't think the Jaguars are, going to get shut out by any means, but I don't think they're going to do as well as they did against Indianapolis last week. Titans should be the favorite in this game for the reason that Derrick Henry exists and Ryan Tannehill is off to a good start. Corey Davis did show up in the injury report, so he'll probably be limited. So that should shift the offensive focus back to A.J. Brown. Gianna Smith looked pretty good in his limited role last week, so I don't really have a reason to pick against the Titans. I still think they're the favorites to win the division, so I'm going to go with the Titans over the Jags. Moving on to my team and my game, the Minnesota Vikings and the Indianapolis Colts. This one's a hard one to pick because we all saw what happened to the Vikings last week against Aaron Rodgers. Definitely got obliterated with that inexperienced secondary, unable to generate much of a pass rush. 7 pressures on 44 dropbacks is not going to do it. They still don't have Danielle Hunter. He's out until week 4. But I still believe in the Mike Zimmer process, and I still believe that he's going to be able to get this team into a position where they're going to win some games this year. And I think because Phillip Rivers last week looked like the Phillip Rivers of 2019, we can use that as precedent going forward. And despite the fact that he's going to get a nice, juicy matchup against a secondary that is inexperienced, I still think the Vikings are going to be able to pull this out. History is against me on this one. Vikings are 0-8 on the road, I believe, against the Indianapolis Colts. 5 matchups in Baltimore that they lost and 3 matchups in Indianapolis that they've lost. So this would be the first all-time win on the road against the Colts, if my history is correct. So this feels like an upset, even though it doesn't match one on paper. I believe the Colts are favored by 3 right now currently. Bills and Dolphins, this should really be an easy one. Bills looked pretty good last week despite the viral meme plays that happen to Josh Allen on a weekly basis. I have no fear because the Bills defense is really good, and Ryan Fitzpatrick just threw 3 interceptions last week against the Patriots. So the Bills should be able to win this one with ease. I'd be honestly surprised if the Dolphins were able to keep it close or even within striking distance of a victory, and I'm just waiting to see Tua Tagovailoa sooner rather than later. Moving on to the 49ers and the Jets. The Jets are in a really bad spot. It's gotten to the point where Jamison Crowder is on the injury report. Le'Veon Bell is likely to miss, he is going to miss 3 weeks. He's on the 3-week IR. Jamison Crowder, we don't know his availability for the Sunday's game quite just yet, but he has appeared on the injury report. And that would leave Sam Darnold with the weapons of Chris Herndon, Braxton Berrios. He's already handing off to Frank Gore and Josh Adams and Kalen Ballage, who are practice squad players at best. Frank Gore can probably tote the rock a good solid 15 times, but it's just not enough. And the defense is not good enough. The 49ers are struggling with injuries themselves. George Kittle with his knee sprain, Deebo Samuel. They just put Richard Sherman on IR. But I think that they get a sort of R&R week to bring themselves back to full health against the Jets, because the Jets are just absolutely depleted. This roster is not good, and Adam Gase just inches closer to being fired. Next game, Rams and Eagles. This one's pretty tough to decide. Rams put up a good performance against the Cowboys last week. Aaron Donald looked great. Jalen Ramsey had a good game. Robert Woods was fantastic. The Eagles were bad. They had 4 turnovers that led to all kinds of points for the Washington football team. Carson Wentz was under duress from the front 7 of the Washington football team last week. That pass rush ended up being pretty good. But the Eagles get some players back this week. They'll get Lane Johnson. They'll get Miles Sanders. Jalen Reagor had a nice catch for 55 yards last week, and he ran a lot of routes. So I think the Eagles should bounce back with a win over the Rams. I don't know if this is if you could call this an upset. The Eagles are favored at 2.5. Last I checked the lines. But I'm going to go with the Eagles for this game. Moving on, Broncos and Steelers. The Broncos are without Von Miller. They lost Chris Harris in the offseason. They lost, or not lost, but Philip Lindsay is getting a second opinion on his turf toe. We all saw what they did to Saquon Barkley. I'm sorry if you have Melvin Gordon on your fantasy team like I do this week. He's on your bench. I don't see any way the Broncos really are able to hang with the Steelers. They're just not as good as them. And Drew Lock is probably going to go through some growing pains having Bud Dupree in his face for 60 minutes on Sunday. So not a good start for the Broncos. They'll end up 0-2. The Steelers will move to 2-0. Next, we have the Bucs and the Panthers. I picked the Panthers last week to be an upset over the Raiders, and they almost did it. I picked the Saints last week over the Bucs. That came true. The Bucs are going to be without Chris Godwin, most likely. He's entered the concussion protocol. Mike Evans is still nursing a hamstring. He had the one catch for 2 yards and a touchdown last week. He was mostly a decoy. He's not very good against the Saints. It's a better matchup this week if he's fully healthy, but hamstrings tend to linger. On the defensive side of the ball, despite the Saints' offense not looking their best, they still gave up quite a bit of points. So I'm going to do it once again, and I'm going to pick the Panthers to make an upset. And I base this off of the fact that at least Matt Rule was aggressive last week, and I think going up against the future Hall of Famer first ballot Tom Brady, that he's going to want to be aggressive again. Teddy Bridgewater is going to come out, and they're going to sling it. Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore will get more involved. They still have Christian McCaffrey, who is really tough to scheme against and defend. So I think Terrific Tom is going to start 0 for 2, and that's going to send Bucs fans into a little bit of a what the hell is going on type of mood. Moving on, we have the Washington football team against the Cardinals. I picked the football team as an upset pick last week. That ended up happening. I'm not going to do that again. I think the Cardinals are for real, and they'll be able to handle everything that the football team gave the Eagles and then some. So Cardinals with the win, they move to 2-0. Moving on to the Chiefs and Chargers. Sorry to tell you this, Los Angeles Chargers fans, but going toe-to-toe with the Bengals and barely escaping with a win because of a missed field goal that would have tied it up, letting Joe Burrow sort of, do what he wants with 64% of his passes completed. Now you face Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. I don't think there's any way that you can hang with these guys. It is what it is. Chiefs with the win. Moving on for the Ravens and the Texans. This is another hard one to pick. I want to pick this as sort of a trap game for the Ravens. But the problem is that the Texans, I don't think that they're ready, to be able to face this good competition. There is a realistic chance that they're going to have a very poor start to their season, whether it be 0-3, 0-4 start. So I'm going to go with the Ravens in this matchup because a number of things. If the Ravens are able to do what they want to do, Mark Andrews looked great last week. J.K. Dobbins looked great last week. Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown. There's just too many options on this Ravens offense for the Texans to be able to compete with all of it, and they don't have the defense that they used to a number of years ago. And then on the offensive side, we seen the offensive line completely underachieve last week against the Chiefs defense, and I would argue that the Ravens front seven is just as good, if not a little bit better than that. So Ravens with the win over the Texans. Bill O'Brien is starting to feel a little bit of pressure. Patriots and Seahawks. Once again, I've moved over to the little magnets, ran out of space with the big one, so they're a little bit hidden behind me today. Patriots and Seahawks is another tough one because you don't want to pick against Bill Belichick. That's really hard to do, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to pick the Seahawks. There is no home field advantage in this year, other than the fact that they have to travel. So I don't think that the fact that this is being played in Foxborough is going to matter all that much. So I'm going to take the Seahawks over the Patriots, and Bill Belichick will be finding himself at the 1-1 mark after this game. If now, it is completely possible that he's going to figure out a way to scheme Russell Wilson out of this game, but I think Russell Wilson is just too good right now for that to happen, and Belichick himself has acknowledged it. For the Monday night game, the Saints are without Michael Thomas. They didn't look all that great against Tampa Bay. The Raiders, almost got creeped up on by the Panthers, so there's a little, give here between these two teams. So I'm going to go with an upset, and I'm going to go with the fact that the Raiders are going to win this game against the Michael Tomless Saints. Yes, I said that correctly. And they're going to open up the season in their new stadium in Las Vegas with a win. And that is just completely on the fact that maybe the Saints need a little bit of a wake-up call because they sort of cruised last week against the Bucs once everything was sort of in hand. So I'm going with the Raiders over the Saints. We'll see what happens. Those are the picks for Week 2. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.